The bullet had gone in clean, but it had refused to come out clean, and for 11 years the man they called the Silent King had carried the small piece of lead pressed against a rib like a second heartbeat. 11 years without a single doctor being allowed to touch him. 11 years of stitching himself in bathroom mirrors, of pouring liquor over wounds that should have needed surgery, of dismissing the finest surgeons in 3 countries with one flick of his eyes. And then, on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October, a soft-spoken night nurse with tired eyes and flowers still dusted on the cuff of her scrubs walked into his private suite carrying a tray of gauze, and everything he had built around himself for over a decade quietly began to crack. Her name was Delphine Moreau, and she had never been the kind of woman anyone remembered. She was 31 years old, plus size in a way that had followed her since childhood, with a full round face, soft double chin, heavy arms. She always tried to hide inside long cardigans, a wide broad torso, a large bust, that no uniform ever fit right, a soft midsection, and wide hips that made the hospital scrubs pull in places she wished they wouldn't. She had a warm brown gaze, a quiet mouth, and hands that were, without exception, the gentlest hands in the entire cardiac wing of St. Ivo Memorial Hospital. Nobody ever said it out loud, but the patients knew. The dying men who woke up scared at 3 in the morning knew. The old women who couldn't remember their own children knew. When Delphine's shift started, the whole floor breathed a little easier. She had never been to a gala, never owned a designer bag, never once been the woman a man looked at twice in a crowded room. She lived in a walk-up 2 blocks from the hospital, kept a small orchid on her windowsill, baked bread on her days off, and told herself, very firmly and very often, that this was enough. That was the woman who walked into Suite 12 of the private wing that October night. And the man waiting inside was Roman Vasquille. 6'3", black hair cut ruthlessly short, a jaw carved out of some colder country, and eyes the exact gray of a gun barrel that had just been fired. He wore a black shirt half unbuttoned, because they had tried and failed to get him to change into a hospital gown. He sat on the edge of the bed with the stillness of a man who had never once in his adult life been in a room he did not control. Delphine did not know who he was. She had not been briefed. The head nurse had shoved the tray into her arms 12 minutes earlier and hissed, "Go, go, none of the others will do it. The man is refusing everyone. If you get thrown out too, we lose the contract. Just go be sweet at him, Delphine. That is the one thing you are good at." So Delphine had gone. She knocked twice, softly, and pushed the door open with her hip, because both her hands were full. "Good evening, sir," she said, in the voice she used for frightened patients and stray cats. "I'm Delphine. I've been asked to check your dressing before the doctor comes back." Roman Vasquille lifted his head. For a single, unreadable second, the Silent King simply looked at her. He saw a woman his men would have described, in their polite reports, as heavyset. He saw the 2 tight scrub tops straining across a generous bust, the soft belly pressing against the drawstring waistband, the wide hips, the full arms, the round cheeks flushed pink from having climbed 3 flights of stairs because she was too polite to make anyone hold the elevator. He saw the way she did not look at his face, the way women usually looked at his face, with that particular hunger that had bored him for a decade. She looked at his shoulder, at the bandage, at the small dark bloom of red seeping through the white. "Oh," she said quietly, "that's bleeding through. May I?" No one had asked Roman Vasquille. "May I?" In 11 years. People asked his permission. They asked his forgiveness. They begged for their lives. But no one, absolutely no one, asked him, "May I?" in the same tone one might use to ask if they could pet a nervous dog. "Yes," he said. His own voice surprised him. Delphine set her tray down on the rolling table, washed her hands with the careful thoroughness of a woman who took the small things seriously, snapped on gloves that barely stretched over her full fingers, and stepped close. She smelled like clean cotton and, faintly, of vanilla. She peeled back the corner of the tape with a slowness that told him, without her saying a word, that she knew this was going to hurt, and she was sorry. "I'm going to lift this in one motion," she murmured. "On 3, 1, 2. She lifted it on 2. He did not react, but his eyes moved. "You said 3, he said. "I know." She almost smiled. "It hurts less if you don't brace for it." "I'm sorry for the small lie." Something in Roman Vasquil's chest did something it had not done in 11 years. It stuttered. She worked on him for 18 minutes. She cleaned the wound, which was not. She noted with a small controlled breath. A surgical wound at all, but something older and angrier, something that had been reopened by force. She did not ask about it. She did not gasp when she saw the map of scars across his ribs, the puckered white starburst under his collarbone that could only be one thing, the long silver line down his side that could only be another. She just worked. And she talked. Not about him. She talked about the rain, about how the pigeon on the window ledge had built her nest out of a shredded lottery ticket, about how the vending machine on the 4th floor had eaten her dollar earlier and she had considered it a personal betrayal. Roman Vasquil, who had sat through interrogations by 3 governments without speaking a single word, listened to a plus-size night nurse describe a pigeon, and did not want her to stop talking. When she finished, she stepped back and pulled off her gloves. "There," she said. "The doctor should still take another look, but it won't get infected tonight. You're going to be fine." "I know," he said. She laughed, a small, startled laugh, as if she had not expected him to speak at all. "Well," she said, "that's the confidence I like to see." "Good night, sir, Delphine," he said. She paused in the doorway. "Yes?" She blinked, ducked her chin, and disappeared into the corridor, and Roman Vasquil sat alone in the suite, with the smell of vanilla still hanging in the air, and understood, with the clean certainty he had built an empire on, that he was in a great deal of trouble. The next morning, Delphine arrived at St. Ivo to find a bouquet on the front desk of the cardiac wing. Not a small one. A cathedral of white peonies, cream roses, and one single absurdly perfect black orchid, arranged in a crystal vase that alone was probably worth 6 months of her rent. The card said simply, "For the nurse in Suite 12. Thank you." Marisol, the day nurse who was Delphine's best and loudest friend, screamed so loudly that a resident dropped his clipboard. "Delphine," Marisol shrieked. "Delphine, these are for you." "Who are these from?" "I don't know," Delphine whispered, hiding her round pink face behind her hands. "Marisol, please, everyone is looking." "Everyone should be looking," Marisol declared. "A man sent you a black orchid. Do you know how hard it is to find a black orchid? They do not occur in nature. Delphine. He had it commissioned. I helped a patient with his bandage," Delphine mumbled. "That is all." Marisol, hands on her hips, gave her friend the long, slow look of a woman who had spent 4 years watching Delphine bring homemade sourdough to a hospital break room and be tipped only in polite smiles. "Baby," Marisol said, "I am telling you right now. That was not a bandage patient. That was a man." Delphine took the flowers home in a taxi she could not afford, put the vase on the tiny kitchen counter of her walk-up, and sat across from it for an hour with a cup of tea going cold in her hands, telling herself very firmly that rich men sent flowers the way normal men said thank you. That this meant nothing. That she should not, under any circumstances, imagine those cold gray eyes again. She imagined them, anyway. She did not know, sitting there in her small kitchen, with her orchid, and her cardigan and her cooling tea, that 32 blocks away, in a black glass tower that owned half the skyline, Roman Vasquille had spent the entire morning in a meeting that had begun with the sentence, "Tell me everything about her." His consigliere, a lean man with silvering temples and a permanent expression of amused suffering named Corvin Adair, sat across the mahogany desk with a slim folder and an even slimmer smile. Delphine Marie Moreau, Corvin read, 31. Registered nurse, 7 years at St. Ivo, top evaluations across the board. Father deceased, mother in a care home in Ram, that Miss Moreau visits twice a month and pays for out of pocket, which is why she works 2 extra shifts every week. No siblings. No romantic partner in the last 4 years, and the previous one was a mid-level accountant who cheated on her with a woman half her size, which she has apparently mentioned to no one but her best friend Marisol Vega and a bartender in the 12th. No debts, no enemies. Bakes bread, has, and I quote from the janitor, the kindest voice in the entire building. Roman said nothing. Corvin turned a page. She is also, he added, in case my employer is planning to pretend otherwise, a plus-size woman. Which I mention only because you have never, in the 11 years I have known you, so much as glanced at a woman who was not surgically constructed to sell perfume, and yet, this morning, at 4 in the afternoon, I received a request to trace the personal history of a heavy-set cardiac nurse. So, I feel it is professionally necessary to ask. Ask what? Roman said. Corvin closed the folder. Are we, he said, going to be doing this? We are. Corvin nodded slowly, as if a long private suspicion had just been confirmed. Very good, he said. Shall I prepare the standard protocols? Surveillance for her safety, a discreet detail on the hospital, a review of every person she interacts with, and, given your history, the quiet acquisition of any establishment she frequents that might one day be used against her. Yes. Corvin picked up his pen. Do we? He asked, in the same mild voice. Want to inform Miss Moreau of any of this? No. Ever. Not yet. Corvin allowed himself at last, the small smile of a man who had waited 11 years to watch his oldest friend lose his mind over a woman. As you wish, sir, he said. As you wish. Over the following weeks, small, strange things began to happen in Delphine's life. The landlord who had been threatening to raise her rent by 40% suddenly appeared at her door with a sheepish smile and a new lease that lowered it by 10. The vending machine on the 4th floor, the one that had eaten her dollar, was replaced overnight with a new one, and the small paper sign taped to it read, "Complimentary for all night staff, courtesy of a donor." Her mother's care home in Reims called weeping with joy to say that an anonymous benefactor had paid the next 5 years of fees in a single wire transfer, and had also arranged for a private garden to be built outside her mother's window, because the file noted that Delphine's mother loved roses. Delphine sat down on the floor of her walk-up when she heard about the garden, and cried into a dish towel until her round face was blotchy and her chest ached. She did not for 1 second, connect any of it to the man in Suite 12. Rich men did not do such things for nurses. Rich men, in Delphine's experience of rich men, did not do such things for anyone. She continued her shifts. And she continued, twice, to be assigned to Suite 12, because Roman Vasquille had made a substantial donation to the hospital on the small, quiet condition that a specific nurse handle his aftercare. He was, according to his chart, being treated for a non-specific muscular injury. He was, in truth, perfectly healed within the first week. He kept coming back. He would sit on the edge of the bed, half unbuttoned, and let her check a wound that no longer needed checking. She would talk about the pigeon whose eggs had hatched, about her mother, whose new garden had somehow already produced roses in November, about Marisol, who had recently developed a crush on a paramedic and required daily strategy meetings. Roman would listen. Sometimes he would ask a question. One single, quiet question, and she would answer for 10 minutes without noticing. Once, when her cardigan sleeve slipped, revealed a bruise on her forearm from a combative patient, his entire body went so still that the temperature of the room seemed to drop. "Who?" he said, end quote. "Oh," she said, tugging the sleeve down, flustered. "It's nothing. A gentleman on the 3rd floor. He has dementia. He doesn't mean it." "His name," Roman said. "Oh." "Please don't," she whispered, because something in his voice frightened her and thrilled her at once. "He is a sick old man, sir. He does not know what he does. Please." Roman Vasquille, who in his life had ordered actions for less, looked at the plus-sized nurse standing in his suite begging him for mercy on behalf of the man who had bruised her, and let out one slow breath. "As you wish," he said. He did not touch the old man. He did, however, quietly fund an entirely new dementia ward at St. Ivo the following week, with 3 additional trained staff members, so that no nurse would ever again be alone with a combative patient in a corridor. Delphine read about the donation in the hospital newsletter, gasped aloud, and told Marisol, "Isn't it wonderful? Someone finally understands." Marisol looked at her friend over the rim of her coffee cup for a very long moment. "Baby," Marisol said. "Baby, what?" Marisol opened her mouth, closed it, and shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "I love you. Keep being exactly the way you are." The trouble, real trouble, arrived on a Thursday evening in December. Delphine was working the late shift, exhausted, hair frizzing out of its bun, when a man in a very expensive suit walked into the cardiac wing and demanded to see the nurse who had been treating the patient in Suite 12. His name was Percival Kane. He was the son of a senator, the grandson of a shipping magnate, and had spent his entire 34 years being told he was important. He had also, as it happened, been trying without success for 6 months to get a meeting with Roman Vasquille. His people had traced the unusual pattern of Roman's visits to St. Ivo, had identified the specific nurse assigned to him, and had concluded, with the arrogant simplicity of the very rich, that this nurse must be Roman's mistress. Percival Kane had come to negotiate, which he intended to do by embarrassing her into a meeting. "You," he said when Delphine came out to the front desk, "are you Moreau?" "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" He looked her up and down. He took in the wide hips, the soft belly, the full arms, the round anxious face, and he laughed. Not a small laugh, a loud, ugly, carrying laugh that turned every head in the corridor. "Oh," he said. "Oh, this is delicious. This is what he's slumming with, this. My God. I owe someone in the office $50,000. I bet him it would be a model." The corridor went silent. Delphine felt every drop of blood leave her face. "Excuse me, sir," she whispered. "No. No. Don't be shy, sweetheart," Percival said, walking closer. "I'm impressed, honestly. Do you know what he is? Do you have any idea what kind of man is paying you? Or is he paying you? He must be. Look at you. No man like that touches something like you for free. What is it? An hourly rate? A flat monthly? Does he expense you?" "Sir, please," Delphine said, and her voice cracked in the middle of the word please, and she hated herself for it. The waiting room was full. Patients, visitors, 2 doctors, 3 orderlies. No one moved, no one said a word. Delphine had spent her entire life being invisible, and it turned out invisibility offered no protection at all when someone finally decided to point. Percival Kane leaned on the desk and smiled. "Tell him," he said, that Percival Kane wants a meeting. Tomorrow. My office. Tell him if he doesn't come, I'll have every newspaper in the city running photographs of his fat little nurse by Monday morning. He is a very private man, isn't he? He wouldn't want that. Delphine could not speak. She could feel tears building behind her eyes, and she was not going to let them fall in front of this man. The elevator, at the end of the corridor, gave a soft, musical chime. The doors opened. Roman Vasquille stepped out. He was in a black overcoat, dusted with rain. His gray eyes moved across the corridor in one quiet sweep, took in the crowd, took in the frozen nurse behind the desk with her round face white and her hands shaking, took in the man in the expensive suit leaning toward her. He walked without hurry across the length of the cardiac wing. He did not raise his voice. He did not raise a hand. He simply came to stand beside Delphine, close enough that his shoulder was almost touching hers, and looked at Percival Kane, the way a man looks at something small he has found on the bottom of his shoe. "Kane," he said. Percival's smug expression flickered. "Vasquille," he said, recovering. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing a meeting." "We were not," Roman said. He turned very slightly toward Delphine. "Did this man touch you?" "No, sir," she whispered. "He only spoke to me." "What did he say?" She could not repeat it. She shook her head. Roman did not press her. He turned back to Percival Kane. "You will leave this hospital," he said in a voice that was almost gentle. "You will go to your office, you will sit at your desk, and you will wait to see what happens to your life." "I don't respond to threats," Percival snapped. "That was not a threat," Roman said. "That was a schedule." He looked once more at the frozen crowd in the corridor. "Every one of you," he said, in that same terrifyingly calm voice, "saw a woman being abused in her workplace, and none of you spoke. I will remember that as well." Then he offered Delphine his arm. "Miss Moreau," he said, "may I walk you somewhere quieter?" She took his arm. She was shaking so badly she could barely stand, and his arm under her hand was as steady as stone. He walked her to the small staff garden behind the wing, sat her on a bench under a lamp, took off his coat and put it around her shoulders. The coat smelled of cedar and rain and something colder and cleaner underneath. "Breathe," he said quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm crying. I'm sorry, sir." Roman Vasquille crouched in front of the bench so that his face was below hers, so that she did not have to look up at anyone, so that for the first time in the entire encounter, she was the tallest person in her own field of vision. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said. "He is going to hurt me," she whispered. He said, "Photographs, sir," he said, "newspapers. And I have a mother. I have a mother who cannot see me on a front page. Being called those things, please, sir. I don't know who you are. But please, I know who I am." He said, "And no photograph of you will ever be printed. Not tomorrow. Not on Monday. Not ever, do you understand me?" She looked at him. Really looked. At the gray eyes, at the scar she had cleaned, at the man who 3 months ago had been an unknown patient in a bloody shirt, and who now sat crouched in the rain in front of her bench like a soldier, reporting to his queen, Pac. "Who are you?" she whispered. Roman Vasquille considered her for a long moment. "Someone," he said finally, "who is not going to let anything happen to you." By morning, Percival Kane's shipping company had been bought outright by a numbered subsidiary that traced through 11 shell corporations to Roman Vasquille. His seat on 3 charitable boards had evaporated. His credit lines had been quietly closed. His father, the senator, received a phone call at 6 in the morning from a man he had never heard of and would never meet. and hung up 30 seconds later with hands that would not stop trembling for the rest of the week. By noon, Percival Kane was no longer a man of consequence in any city that mattered. Delphine knew none of this. She only knew that when she went in for her next shift, Marisol met her at the door and dragged her into the supply closet and said, "Delphine, Delphine, they are saying that man from last night has lost everything. They are saying it was that patient of yours, Delphine." "I don't know," Delphine whispered. "I don't know, Marisol. I don't know." But she was beginning, slowly, to know. Because roses had appeared in her mother's garden in November. Because vending machines had been replaced. Because her rent had gone down. Because a dementia ward had been built. Because a man with a bullet scar under his collarbone had crouched in the rain in front of a bench and told her that no photograph of her would ever be printed. Ever. Delphine sat down on an overturned bucket in the supply closet, and Marisol sat down beside her, and for a long time neither woman spoke. "Marisol," Delphine said at last, "I think something very large is happening to me." "Baby," Marisol said, taking her hand. "Baby, it has been happening for months." The real threat came for her in January. It was not Percival Kane, who by then was living in his father's guest house and drinking himself to sleep every night. Hapsend. It was someone far older and far more patient. A woman named Adelia Voss, who ran a network of trafficking routes across 3 continents, and who had, 11 years earlier, been the person who put the bullet under Roman Vasquille's collarbone. She had watched from a great distance the strange new softness in the silent king. She had watched him buy a shipping company to protect a nurse. She had watched him build a garden for a mother in Reims. And she had understood with the cold clarity of a predator that after 11 untouchable years, Roman Vasquille finally had a heart, and hearts were the softest, easiest places to put a knife. She had Delphine taken on a Tuesday evening on her walk home from the hospital. It was done cleanly. A black van, 2 men, a cloth over the mouth, and a small, quiet street where the security cameras had all mysteriously gone offline for exactly 6 minutes. Delphine woke up in the dark on a concrete floor with her wrists bound in front of her and her cheek pressed against something cold that smelled of oil. She did not scream. She had, over the past 3 months, been slowly rebuilt from the inside. She had been paid attention to. She had been listened to. She had been treated by the most feared man in a city she had not known was feared, as though she were the most important living thing in his world. She was terrified. But she was not, any longer, small. She sat up. She breathed. She listened. Somewhere, above her, a woman's voice was speaking, in a light musical tone, into a telephone. "Yes," the voice was saying. "Yes, darling, she's here. Perfectly safe. Only slightly bruised. Come and get her yourself, will you? I've been so looking forward to seeing you again." Delphine did not know that 30 miles away, in the black glass tower, Roman Vasquille was holding a phone against his ear and going, for the first time in 11 years, absolutely still with fear. She did not know that. When he hung up the phone, he turned to Corvin Adair and said one word: black. She did not know that this single word activated a protocol that mobilized 416 men, 22 vehicles, 3 helicopters, 9 drones, every satellite favor Roman Vasquille had ever been owed, and every judge, police captain, and border official in a 200-mile radius. She did not know that, within 11 minutes of her cheek touching that concrete floor, every road out of the warehouse district, where Adelia Voss had chosen to hide, was closed by an accident, a broken water main, a fake gas leak, or a genuine police blockade, without a single officer knowing who had ordered it. She only knew that after what felt like a very long time and might have been an hour, A door somewhere banged open, and a voice she recognized, quiet and cold and completely her own, spoke into the darkness. "Delphine!" She burst into tears. "Here," she called. "I'm here, sir. I'm here." Light. A flashlight. Then his face gaunt with something she had never seen on him before, coming out of the dark. And behind him, a wall of men in dark coats, fanning silently through the warehouse the way water fills a room. He dropped to his knees in front of her. He touched her face with hands that were for the first time since she had known him, not quite steady. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No," she whispered. "No, sir. I'm all right." He untied her wrists. He wrapped his coat around her. "Bar." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all, though she was a large, plus-size woman and no man had ever lifted her in her adult life. And he carried her out of the warehouse past the woman named Adelia Voss, who was on her knees on the concrete with 3 men standing behind her. "So, this is the girl who cost me everything." Roman did not look at her. He did not need to. By dawn, Adelia Voss's entire network across 3 continents had been dismantled by a coordinated series of arrests, seizures, and betrayals that would be studied in intelligence briefings for years afterward. Her lieutenants were in 7 different jails in 7 different countries. Her accounts were empty. Her name, which had once made grown men flinch, was, by the following week, a name whispered only in past tense. Roman Vasquille did not raise his voice once during any of it. He carried Delphine out to a car. He got into the back seat with her. He held her, this large, soft woman, still wrapped in his coat, against his chest, and for a very long time neither of them spoke. At last, in the dark of the moving car, Delphine lifted her face. "The roses," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "The rent." "Yes." "The vending machine." "Yes." "The dementia ward." "Yes." "Percival Kane." "Yes." "The company he owned." "You bought it, I bought all of it, sir," she whispered. Roman Vasquille, the silent king who had gone 11 years without being touched by a doctor, looked down at the plus-sized nurse in his arms, the woman with the round face and the soft chin, and the wide hips, and the kindest voice in the whole building, and he told her the truth. "Because you asked me if you may," he said. "That was the first time in 11 years that anyone had asked me for permission instead of demanding my mercy. And you asked to help me. To touch a wound I would have killed any other person for approaching. You did not know who I was. You did not care. You worried about a pigeon? You lied about counting to 3 so it would hurt me less." He stopped. He looked out the window for a moment, and then back at her. "I have been alone," he said, "for a very long time. And on the night you walked into that room, I stopped being alone. I did not ask your permission for that. I do not know how to ask. I only know that, from that night, every resource I have has belonged first to your safety. And I intended for you never to know, because I did not believe I had the right to be known by you." Delphine, whose whole life had been spent being told she was too much of one thing and not enough of another, looked at this terrifying, quiet man who had just moved 400 men through a city to bring her back, and understood at last exactly what she was worth. She reached up and put her soft hand against his hard jaw. "You have the right," she said. 6 months later, on a warm evening in June, St. Ivo Memorial Hospital cut the ribbon on a new wing. It was the largest single donation in the hospital's history. The wing housed a state-of-the-art trauma unit, a research center for cardiac care, and, on the top floor, a small, quiet garden with roses that had been flown in from Rams. The plaque by the entrance read, "The Moreau Wing, dedicated to the nurse who taught a very hard man that the greatest strength is a gentle hand." Delphine cut the ribbon in a soft green dress that fit her plus-size frame beautifully because it had been made for her. Because the man standing beside her in the black suit had learned, over the past 6 months, that the correct response to the woman he loved saying she had nothing to wear was to bring 3 tailors to the apartment they now shared. She was radiant. Her round face glowed. Her full arms were bare in the summer air, and she did not, for the first time in her adult life, feel the urge to hide them. Marisol, standing in the front row of the crowd, was already crying. Corvin Adair, standing behind Roman with a slim smile and his hands folded, was, for the first time in 11 years, also almost crying, though he would deny it to his grave. When the ribbon fell, Roman Vasquille turned to Delphine, in front of 200 people, and did something the Silent King had never done in his life. He knelt. The crowd made a soft, collective sound. "Delphine," he said, in a voice that carried without ever being raised, because a whole city had learned to listen when he spoke. "I have been a man of very few words for a very long time. I have only ever needed 2, will you, a B?" She was already nodding. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Yes. Of course. Yes." He slid a ring onto her full soft finger, and the ring fit perfectly, because of course it did, because he had noticed everything about her from the first night, and then he stood and he kissed her, in front of the hospital and the reporters and the whole staff of the cardiac wing, gently, carefully. The way a man kisses a woman he has spent every day of 6 months learning how to deserve. The pictures of that kiss did run in the newspapers. Every one of them. But they ran with a very different caption than the one Percival Kane had once threatened. They ran under headlines about the quiet billionaire and the beloved nurse, about the mysterious donor who had transformed a hospital, about the woman who had, in the words of one small local columnist who understood the story better than she knew, walked into a room to change a bandage and had, without meaning to, healed something in a man that 11 years and 1,000 doctors had not been able to reach. Delphine kept nursing. She would not stop. She loved her work, she loved her patients, she loved the pigeon on the ledge, whose grandchildren now lived there too. Roman did not ask her to stop. He only asked, quietly, that she never again walk home alone, and she agreed, because she had learned that his protectiveness was not a cage, but a coat offered on a rainy bench to a shivering woman who had never before been kept warm. They were married in the autumn. The ceremony was small. The reception was not. Marisol gave a speech that made the entire room laugh and cry and made Corvin Adair spit out his champagne when she described, in loving detail, the exact moment 3 years earlier when Delphine had come home from a shift and announced that she had, quote, met a very polite man with sad eyes, and Marisol had thought at the time, "Oh no, baby, no please. He is going to break your heart." And how wrong Marisol had been, how gloriously, spectacularly wrong. Delphine's mother, healthier than she had been in a decade, because of the care the new facility could afford her, walked her daughter down the aisle in a wheelchair pushed by Roman himself. Delphine's dress was ivory silk, tailored to celebrate every soft curve she had spent 31 years apologizing for. She had never in her life looked more beautiful, and every person in the room knew it, and no one knew it more completely than the man waiting for her at the end of the aisle. Years later, when people asked Delphine Vasquille, the founder of the Moreau Foundation and the wife of the most powerful man in the city, how it had all happened, she always told the same simple story. "I asked a frightened man if I may," she would say, and it turned out he had been waiting 11 years for someone to ask. And when they asked Roman, on the very rare occasion he answered such questions at all, he would only smile the small private smile he saved for his wife, and say, "She counted to 2 when she should have counted to 3, and I have been grateful every day since." The bullet, the one that had lived under his collarbone for 11 years, was removed by Delphine herself in the 2nd month of their marriage, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in their apartment, with her gentle hands and her steady breath and her whispered, "On 3." She lifted it out on 2. He did not flinch. He only watched her face, this large, beautiful woman who had walked into his life, carrying a tray of gauze, and understood, all over again, that some doors in a man's life are only ever opened by the softest possible hand. And in the end, that was the whole of it. A woman who had spent her life being unseen, and a man who had spent his life being untouchable, meeting in a hospital room on a rainy Tuesday, and quietly, without either of them meaning to, saving each other. Because true strength, it turned out, was never the ability to stand alone for 11 years without letting anyone close. True strength was the courage, when the right person finally walked through the door, to let them stay.